Are you having trouble finding a hygienist? If you are, you're not alone. Ever since the lockdowns ended last year, this has been a problem, and it's only gotten worse with the labor shortage starting at the beginning of 2021. So much so that it was starting to affect MGE clients, which made us dig in to figure out, what's going on and what to do about it. And that's what I want to talk about in this week's tip, how to find a hygienist in today's environment. All right, so before I get into the specific steps to take, I want to just cover a couple basic points on hygiene. First thing is, especially for those doctors out there that are thinking, well, I can just cut down some hygiene days if I can't get a hygienist to cover, or I'll just start doing it myself. Well, first off, hygiene is important to your practice. I know this isn't a huge newsflash, but I want you to look at it from a couple different perspectives. Number one, it's how you achieve. It's one of the key components that allow you to achieve the purpose of your practice. If the purpose of your practice is to help restore health, function, and aesthetic to your patients, which then in turn help them live longer lives, because we know that dental disease can create or at least affect systemic disease, then having a way or a mechanism in place that keeps people coming back helps you to achieve that purpose. How are you going to achieve that purpose if you're not seeing these people regularly, your patients? So that's the first point. Second point is hygiene is a huge practice builder. If you had let's say you were looking at buying an office, and there were two offices for sale, and they were each doing $1 million a year. One office was doing $300,000 or $400,000 a year in hygiene, and the other office was doing about $100,000 with the doctor making up the balance in production. And they were both selling for the same price. Which one are you buying? I'm going to assume you're buying the practice with a lot of hygiene production because there's more patient flow. It builds your practice. It makes your practice more valuable. And lastly, the owner doc doing their own hygiene is just a no-go from a business perspective. There is no way doing your own hygiene that you are ever going to be worth as much as you would chairside doing dentistry. It's just not a good idea. And it also takes away from you doing dentistry on patients. So with all of that in mind, let's take a look first at what are the current market conditions as far as hygienists are concerned. Well, according to the BLS, the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, in 2020, there were 194,830 hygienists in the United States. Now, as a point of comparison, how many doctors were they? Well, obviously, there were over 200,000 dental professionals, but some of those doctors are specialists, and you're not going to find hygienists in oral surgery office for the most part. So just to give you a generalized estimate, combining 2019 and 2020 numbers, there's about 160,000 general dentists in the United States and around 40,000 specialists. So there are plenty of hygienists out there. Obviously, it's affected by locality. You'll be in some areas where there's a lot of hygiene availability and some areas where there's very little. Just as a point, this is going a little bit ways back. Back in the early 90s, I was in the Chicagoland area, and at that time, there were 5 dentists for every 1 hygienist. So if you were a dentist and your hygienist was on vacation and you were calling in a temp, 9 times out of 10, that temp who showed up was a dentist. There was very poor availability at that time in that area. So obviously it depends by area. Now, one other thing that's happened too, and this is more anecdotal, just sort of what we've noticed, a lot has changed since the pandemic began. You had some people change careers, decide to work less, move out of state, etc. We've seen a lot more transition in the hygiene field, obviously, than we've seen in the dental field, in the doctor field, the field of doctors. We've seen a lot more hygienists transition, maybe ones who have decided to work less, maybe ones who have moved out of state or decided to retire. There seems to be, that has affected hygienists a lot more than dentists. So there may have been some hit on availability, but there's still a good amount of them out there. The other thing that you have going now with this tight labor market post-pandemic is you have less availability, and you have, with the inflationary environment that we're in, skyrocketing wages. Let me give you an example. In 2020, the median salary, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and I'm putting these BLS links below if you want to just check them out. The 2020 median salary for a hygienist was $37 an hour. That was median, middle. The high end, the 90th percentile, was $50 an hour. So 37 was the median, 50 was the high end. Compare that to what you're finding now. And I'll give you a little example of this. I was talking to a client who was at one of our seminars a few weeks back, and he had two hygienists apply. He's in Southern California. One was asking for $68 an hour. The other was asking for $70. And so I asked, how much does an associate, a per diem associate charge per hour? It's $50 or $60 more per day. You could hire an associate for an extra $50 or $60 in this area. So those wages have just spiraled out of control. So you've got an inflationary environment, higher wages, and you might have some doctors looking at this and thinking with these higher wages, let's say they're accepting a lot of plans. If you're accepting a lot of planned patients and you see these wages start to spiral out of control, you might look at how is this even going to work to begin with? I can't afford this. And to this point, I decided to do a little research myself, and there's a website called feelookup.com. And I believe this website is owned by MetLife. It has MetLife's logo on it, so I'm assuming if it's not, MetLife will be suing them soon. I'm pretty sure it's owned by MetLife. And I looked at this doctor, this example I gave you in Southern California, I looked at his zip code. Now, he does not accept MetLife, but I wanted to look at this. If I was a dentist practicing in this doctor's town, and I was accepting MetLife, and I have hygienists asking for $68 or $70 an hour, how would that affect me? Well, I took a basic hygiene appointment, a periodic oral exam, an adult cleaning, and 4 bite wings, basic hygiene appointment. The MetLife network reimbursement, the in-network reimbursement for those procedures is $131. So think with this for a second. If you're paying $68 an hour and you're getting $131 for the appointment, your salary is over 50% of the procedure charge. Now, to give you an order of comparison, on this MetLife site, they also estimate what the average full fee is in that area. The average full fee, the median full fee in that area is $308 for those same procedures. So $131, $308. So if you were paying $68 or $70 and you were charging $308, well, that kind of works. Now you're in the 22% range. And especially since the pandemic began, we're able to process patients. We have to process them a little slower. It takes longer to turn over a room than it used to take. So add to this, on top of it all, I know I could go off on the concept of plans and insurance. One thing I will say, because now you have plans starting to lower reimbursements or attempting to with a lot of doctors. So if you're in plans, you need to get out. I've talked about this in prior tips. I also talked about it recently on the MGE podcast, Dental Business RX. I think it's episode 7, if I'm not mistaken. But if you want to check it out and see how you could get out of plans and analyze some of the plans that you have to take a look at how it would affect your practice, you can go to one of our websites called raisemyfees.com. We have a plan analyzer on there, and you can see how it would affect your practice if you were to drop various plans. And that's all I'll say about plans. All right, so that's the condition of the industry. That's what's happening. So now the question becomes, in this environment, how do we go about getting a hygienist? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over 6 basic steps, and these steps escalate. I mean, some you might do at the same time, but they generally escalate. In other words, we've done step 1. All right, nothing happened. Let's do step 2. So I'm going to describe them in sequence like that. You might do a couple at the same time, if you want to stimulate a little bit more. But let's start with the first step. First step, obviously, is something you've probably already done, which is place ads, on Indeed or Dental Post or wherever. Now, a couple things I'll say about the ads you might be placing. The first one is, in a lot of cases, and I've seen doctors do this, or business owners in general, they'll do this with their own marketing as well as employment ads. They write the ads for themselves. What would I respond to? Well, but that's not who you're advertising to. You're advertising to someone else. You sort of have to put yourself in that mindset. What would a hygienist looking for work, what would appeal to them? That's how you have to write the ad. You have to make sure it actually appeals to somebody looking for work, in your area. Next point is you want to make sure any responses that you get are responded to lightning fast. And this is probably, if I had to pick one of the biggest errors that I see small business owners, especially dentists, make, is they get responses, not just to hygiene employment ads, but any employment ad, and they sit on it. They don't call these people right away. So they get a bunch of ads for a receptionist, then, they're busy. Everybody's busy because you're shorthanded. And then you finally get around to calling them back 3 or 4 days later, and the people that you call back all have jobs already. That's just the nature of how this works. If you have someone who's really, a fast mover, They're looking for work. That's what they're doing right now. So you need to call them as as close to instant as possible. And the last point is you want to make sure you don't put too many filters on these ads. Obviously, the person has to be a licensed hygienist, but you don't want to get into random reasons or random filters that really have nothing to do whether this person would be a good fit for your practice. They have to be practicing X amount of years. Is that really that critical? Maybe it is, but you want to make sure you don't put so many filters that you filter out a ton of prospects. Then you'll be getting a decent amount of responses with your ads. The other thing I would do at the same time, you could do this at the same time or use this as step 2 of your escalation, is I would ask my team. Chances are there are members of your team who have been in the industry for a while. They know other people in the industry. They can start spreading the word and asking around, and they might know somebody. So let's say I've done that. I've placed ads. I've asked members of my team, and I'm not getting any bites. I'm not getting anybody who's interested. What is my next step? And again, like I said, you could do all these steps at the same time if you want, but this would be sort of the sequence. The next thing I would do is I would reach out to groups. Maybe there's a hygiene program in your area. One of the local schools might have a hygiene program. I would reach out to the instructors. I'd reach out to anybody in that program to see if they could sort of spread the word. The instructors will know a lot of the hygienists practicing in your area. I'd also look for hygienist Facebook groups and things of this nature. There might be some type of a hygienist group that's associated with the local dental society, and I would want to get in front of these folks, whether it's, I might ask them if I could do some form of a Facebook post or a social media post, an Instagram post, or place some type of advertising in their publications. Now, one other idea, and this actually, you could use this to find an associate as well. I'm going to throw this out. Not everybody takes me up on this idea, but it's a really good idea and it actually really works, is you could call other offices in your area. Give you a story about this. We had a client, this was back in 2006, could not find an associate for the life of them. Could not find an associate. So the husband was the office manager, and Sabri, our deputy chief operating officer, said to them both, well, you should just call the doctors in your area and see if they know anybody. A bit shocked by this. Do you think that would work? Yeah, I know it'll work. We've done it before. So the husband gets on the phone and he pulled out the yellow pages. And for you young people watching, the yellow pages was that big yellow book they would leave on your parents' doorstep that you would go, what is this stupid book? It's at least what my kids did. But it would have a sequential listing of businesses by profession, right? Can't believe I'm explaining the yellow pages, whatever. I have to nowadays. That's how you can tell you're getting old. So he pulled out the yellow pages, went to dentist, and started with A. He got down to, I think, B or C, and he found somebody who had a friend of theirs that was moving in town that was looking for work. They found an associate. You can do the same thing with hygienists. You're looking for a hygienist. They may know somebody who's moved back in the area, someone that had to leave because their office got slow. It's another way to put that communication out there and get it around your community that you are absolutely looking. It's something you should try. I would definitely recommend it. Next thing I would do, let's say I've done all of that and it's no joy, no hygienist yet. What am I going to do next? I'm going to find a way to communicate to as many hygienists as I can in my state. In the U.S., if you are licensed in a certain state, you're licensed to usually practice anywhere in that state. So let's take where MGE is, for example. We're in the Tampa Bay area. Well, a hygienist from Miami or Jacksonville or Tallahassee or Orlando could practice in the Tampa Bay area. And there's a number of different ways you can do this. There is a hygienist association, the ADHA. They have a magazine. They have email list rentals. You could pay a few $1,000s to send out a bulk email. It might even cost less. Bulk emails are not as expensive as you think. We do them quite a bit here to advertise MGE. You could advertise to every hygienist in your state that is listed with the ADHA that you are looking to fill a position. You might go in one of their publications. You might look for dental online communities that have hygienists as members that you could do some form of a bulk email to explain the position that you're looking for. And obviously, this is why the ad is very important. You don't want to waste this money and the ad is terrible, but it's another way to put more eyes on the fact that you need a hygienist, and it goes all over your state. That's the next point of escalation. So let's say we've done all of everything I've described. We've done it all. You could always call a headhunter. I'm not putting that here because the actions I've described up to now, in most cases, are cheaper than a headhunter, and I'm not paying the headhunter after the fact. And you can if it gets real bad. I'm not saying you shouldn't, and there are some good ones out there. If I've done all that and I still have no hygienist, what do I do? Well, a little bit earlier in this tip, I mentioned how we had a client in Southern California where hiring an associate was only an extra $50 or $60 a day. That's what I would do. I'd hire an associate to cover hygiene. Now, obviously, the associate I'm hiring to cover hygiene is not going to be somebody who's been out of school for 10 years, or been practicing for 10 years, that's placing implants and doing sinus lifts and things like this. That's not my hygiene associate. Might be a new grad who's looking for a mentorship type situation they can grow into. Might be somebody who's slowed down a bit that just wants to keep their hand in the industry. But I'm going to bring in a dentist to do hygiene. There are some advantages to that. In some states, the hygienist can't operate unless there's a doctor on site. Well, in that case, you got no problem. There's a doctor on site. They're a dentist. You might also be able to have them cover your emergencies and on-call appointments or be on call for you as well. If you're at it, you want to leave town for a day or two, you have coverage. Those are the advantages of having a doctor. Now, for the doctor themselves, this may not be a long-term solution that they're looking for. Well, that could eventually develop into a situation where they go from being the hygiene associate to just doing regular dentistry. It evolves that way. So how might that play out? Let's say I have a general practice and you have a dentist and we have a hygienist. And they're both 4 days a week. All right. So let's say I'm losing that 4-day-a-week hygienist. They're moving out of state. And I cannot find somebody to take this position. All right, I could always hire people a day at a time, there's different ways you can do it. But I can't fill that position to my satisfaction. So I bring in an associate doctor to do the hygiene. All right, that associate would not like to do that as a permanent job. They would like to eventually work their way out of it. All right, well, what could we do? What I would probably do at that point is I would focus on adding hygiene days. You might go, well, why am I adding hygiene days? I just had to bring in an associate to cover the 4 hygiene days that I have. Let me explain. Here's what I do. So I've already got 4 days of hygiene, and this doctor is covering it. So let's say I add 2 more days of hygiene, and I might bring in, some day-a-week hygienist to cover those other 2 days. So now I have 6 days of hygiene. This brings us to, we have a doctor to hygienist ratio. All right, so let me explain what I mean by this. In a practice, you don't want to set up, obviously you need a certain amount of hygiene, but you don't want to have too much and you don't want to have too little. We normally recommend a 1-to-1 ratio or a 1 to 1.5 ratio, meaning there is 1 doctor day for every 1 to 1.5 hygiene days. Now, you might be practicing with 2 full-time hygienists and you're a sole practitioner. Some people can pull it off. Some people have trouble with it. It actually becomes counterproductive to their ability to sell and be productive because, in some cases, twice an hour, they're degloving to go do a hygiene exam. Let's say they had 3 hygienists. Then it becomes a real problem. They're running around. They're spending most of their time doing hygiene checks. So you want to maintain this ratio, 1 to 1.5. So I've got 4 days doctor, 4 days hygienist, which is really an associate right now. I'm at 1 to 1. I add 2 more days. Now I'm at 1 to 1.5. I have 6 days of hygiene, 4 of which are covered by an associate, and I have 4 doctor days. So now what might I do next? I might take 2 of those because of this patient flow I have coming into the practice, there's probably more dentistry to be done. It's starting to book up my schedule as the owner doctor. Well, I could probably take that associate and have them cut out 2 hygiene days and get coverage for those. Maybe the 2-day-a-week hygienist I hired might want to expand to 4, and I've bought myself some time to find this hygienist. I keep doing these actions I just described. So now I have the doctor doing 2 doctor days and 2 hygiene days, and I have a hygienist doing 4 hygiene days. Do you see? I've maintained this 1-to-1 ratio, and I've actually added productivity to the practice. You keep going forward, eventually I have 2 full-time hygienists, and I have 8 days of hygiene, and I have 2 full-time doctors. It's a good practice expander. Anyway, I know that was a lot. I hope it helps. This is what we've been recommending to our clients, and many of our clients are not having this issue, which I know a lot of doctors are, so I hope this helps you and you can apply it into your practice. And if you'd like help with anything, you can always contact us here at MGE at 800-640-1140 or find us online at mgeonline.com. And if you'd like to see more tips like this, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below and the notification bell so that you're notified as soon as they come out. We'll see you at the next tip.